The wind cut across the Wyoming platform like a blade, and Cole Maddox stood against it the way he stood against everything, silent, unmoved, waiting. His hat was pulled low, his coat buttoned to the throat, his boots planted in 2 inches of late March snow that refused to melt. Behind him, the town of Medicine Bow had gathered like crows on a fence, pretending they had other business, but watching him all the same. They always watched Cole Maddox. He was the kind of man people noticed, not because he wanted them to, but because he took up space in a way that demanded it. 6'3", shoulders like an ox yoke, hands that could break a man's jaw or mend a fence post with equal efficiency. He'd been working his ranch alone for 3 years since his father died, and the solitude had carved him down to something essential. No excess, no softness. Just work, land, and survival. Today, that was supposed to change. "Think she'll be pretty, Cole?" Old man Garrett called from near the station house, grinning around his tobacco. "You paid enough for her." Cole didn't answer. He never answered Garrett. $100, someone else muttered, "for a mail-order bride. Hell, I'd have given you my sister for 50. Laughter rippled through the small crowd. Cole's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on the train track stretching east toward nowhere. He'd written to the matrimonial agency in Boston 6 months ago, specified exactly what he needed. A woman of refinement and education, suitable for managing a household, capable of bearing children between the ages of 20 and 28. He'd sent a bank draft for $100. The agency had sent back a letter with a name, Miss Constance Hartwell, and a photograph of a pale, pretty woman with soft hands and softer eyes. She was supposed to arrive today. The train whistle screamed across the frozen plain, and Cole felt something tighten in his chest. Not excitement. He didn't do excitement, but something close to relief. The ranch house was falling apart. His clothes were mended so many times they were more thread than fabric. He ate the same 3 meals on rotation because he couldn't cook anything else. He needed help. That was all this was. A transaction, a solution. The train screeched to a halt in a cloud of steam and coal smoke. Doors banged open. A few passengers stepped down. A salesman with a sample case, a miner heading to the camps, an older woman clutching a carpet bag. Cole scanned each face, looking for the soft features from the photograph. Then the last passenger appeared. She stood at the top of the steps for a moment, one hand gripping the rail, the other holding a battered canvas bag that looked like it had crossed the country twice. She wasn't wearing gloves. Her coat was too thin for Wyoming, patched at the elbows and missing a button. Her dark hair was pinned back but already coming loose in the wind. And when she looked up, Cole saw her face. Nothing like the photograph. She was older than 28, maybe 32, maybe more. Her skin was tanned from sun and wind, not the pale porcelain he'd expected. Her hands were scarred. Her jaw was set in a way that made her look like she was bracing for a fight, and her eyes, dark, wary, exhausted, met his for half a second before dropping to the platform. She stepped down. The snow crunched under her worn boots. Cole didn't move. Behind him, someone laughed. "That ain't no Boston lady." Garrett whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned. They sent you the wrong one, Cole." The woman, whoever she was, walked toward him slowly, like she was crossing a battlefield. She stopped 3 feet away and set down her bag. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath it. "You Cole Maddox?" "Yeah," she swallowed. "I'm Lena Savas." "You're not Constance Hartwell." "No." She looked away toward the distant hills, then back at him. "Constance. She changed her mind. Last minute. The agency sent me instead." Cole stared at her. The wind howled between them. "They send you with a refund?" Her face went pale. "No." "Then you need to get back on that train." "I can't." Her voice cracked, just a little. "I got no money for a ticket back. I got nothing. They told you wrong." He turned and started walking toward his horse. Behind him, the crowd murmured and shifted. He could hear Garrett laughing, could feel their eyes burning into his back. His face burned with something he refused to name. Humiliation, rage, both. "Mr. Maddox, us." Her voice followed him, louder now, desperate. "Please." He stopped but didn't turn around. "I can work," she said. "I'm strong. I can cook, clean, mend, whatever you need. I don't need much. Just a roof and food. Please." "I got nowhere else to go." Cole turned slowly. She was still standing there by her bag, shoulders square despite the way her hands were shaking. The crowd had gone quiet now, waiting to see what he'd do. He looked at her, really looked, saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her coat hung on a frame that was too thin, the stubborn set of her mouth that said she'd been refused before and survived it. She wasn't what he ordered, wasn't even close, but she was here. "You can stay," he said finally. The words came out flat, hard, but not as a wife. "You'll work for room and board. You fail, you leave. Understood?" Something flickered across her face. Relief maybe, or just the absence of panic. She nodded. "Understood." "Get your bag." She picked it up and followed him to where his horse and wagon waited. The crowd parted as they passed, and Cole felt their amusement like a physical weight. The great Cole Maddox, brought low by a mail-order mix-up. They'd be talking about this for months. He didn't care. He cared about getting home, getting back to work, and forgetting this whole mess as fast as possible. The ranch was 7 miles north of town, and they rode in silence. Lena sat in the back of the wagon, hunched against the wind, while Cole drove with his eyes fixed on the horizon. The sky was the color of old iron, and the land stretched out in every direction like something abandoned by hope. No trees, no shelter, just frozen earth and wind that never stopped. Lena watched the back of his head and tried not to think about what she'd just done. She'd lied. Not about Constance. That part was true. The woman had taken one look at the train platform in Chicago and decided she wasn't going any further west. She'd paid Lena $20 to take her place, handed over the letter from the agency, and disappeared into the city like smoke. Lena had stared at that letter for an hour before making her decision. $20 wouldn't last a week. She had no family, no prospects, no way to survive another winter in the tenements. The agency letter said Cole Maddox was looking for a wife. It didn't say he was looking for someone young and soft and useless. So she'd gotten on the train, and now she was here, on a wagon heading toward a future she couldn't see, working for a man who looked at her like she was a piece of broken equipment he'd been sold by mistake. She'd survived worse. The ranch appeared on the horizon like a scar, a low house, a barn, a few outbuildings, all hunkered against the wind. No paint, no decoration, just raw wood and function. As they got closer, Lena could see how much of it was falling apart. Shutters hanging crooked, a section of roof patched with mismatched boards, fences leaning at odd angles. Cole pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down without a word. Lena grabbed her bag and followed. Inside, the house was worse than the outside. One main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting space. A cold fireplace dominated one wall. A table with 2 chairs sat in the middle. Shelves lined the walls, half empty. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. A narrow hallway led to what she assumed were bedrooms, and the whole place smelled like old smoke and loneliness. Cole set his hat on a hook and turned to face her. "You'll sleep in the back room," he said. "There's a bed and a stove. You'll cook, clean, mend, and tend the house. I work the land and the stock. We eat at 6 in the morning and 6 at night. You don't bother me. I don't bother you. Clear?" "Clear." He studied her for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he was trying to figure out if she'd last the week. "You got any other clothes?" "Just what's in the bag," he grunted. "There's some old things in the chest in your room. Belong to my mother. Use what fits." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. It's practical." He moved toward the door. "I'll be in the barn. Get yourself settled." He left without another word, and Lena stood alone in the cold, dusty room that was now her home. She didn't cry. She'd stopped crying years ago. Instead, she set down her bag, rolled up her sleeves, and started looking for a broom. Well, the first week was a test, and Lena knew it. Cole watched her constantly. Not obviously, but she could feel his eyes tracking her movements, measuring her effort, waiting for her to break. She didn't give him the satisfaction. She woke before dawn every morning and had coffee ready when he came in from the barn. She cooked what little food there was: beans, bacon, bread she baked herself from flour and lard. She cleaned the house top to bottom, scrubbing years of neglect out of corners and crevices. She mended his clothes, patched the curtains, organized the shelves, and she learned the land. Wyoming in March was brutal. The wind never stopped. The cold cut through every layer she wore. Snow would melt during the day and freeze again at night, turning the ground into a treacherous mix of mud and ice. But Lena had grown up poor in Chicago, had spent winters sleeping in rooms with broken windows, had worked 12-hour shifts in factories that didn't heat their floors. She knew cold. She knew exhaustion. This was just a different kind of hard. Cole worked from dawn to dusk, repairing fences, tending cattle, hauling water, chopping wood. She watched him sometimes from the kitchen window, a solitary figure moving across the frozen landscape with mechanical efficiency. He never stopped, never slowed, and he never asked her for help. But on the 8th day, something changed. She was outside hanging laundry when she heard the crash. It came from the barn, a splintering sound followed by cursing. Lena dropped the sheet she was holding and ran. Inside the barn, Cole was on his back beneath a half-collapsed workbench, his leg pinned under a beam that had given way. His face was twisted in pain, and when he saw her, his expression went dark. "Get out." "You're hurt." "I said get out." Lena ignored him. She grabbed the beam and lifted with everything she had. It barely moved. Cole cursed again and tried to push from underneath, and together they managed to shift it enough for him to pull his leg free. He rolled onto his side, breathing hard. Blood was seeping through his pants just above the knee. "Can you stand?" she asked. "Yeah." He couldn't. Lena got under his arm and hauled him upright. He was heavy, solid muscle and stubborn pride, but she'd lifted worse. She half dragged him out of the barn and across the yard to the house, ignoring his protests the whole way. Inside, she pushed him into a chair and went for the medical kit she'd found under the kitchen sink. "I don't need—" "Shut up and let me look." He went quiet. Maybe from shock, maybe because no one had talked to him like that in years. She cut away the fabric around the wound. It was deep, a jagged gash from the splintered beam, but clean. She washed it with water from the kettle, poured whiskey over it while he hissed through his teeth, and stitched it closed with the same steady hand she'd used to mend his shirts. When she was done, she wrapped it tight and sat back. "You'll live." Cole stared at her. His face was pale, his jaw clenched, but his eyes were different now. Less empty, more present. "Where'd you learn to do that?" "Factory I worked at in Chicago. People got hurt all the time. You learned or you watched them bleed." He was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you," he said finally. Lena nodded and started cleaning up the blood. That night, for the first time since she'd arrived, they ate dinner in something other than silence. Cole's leg took 2 weeks to heal enough for him to walk without limping, and during that time, the dynamic shifted. He couldn't do the heavy work, so Lena did it. She hauled water from the well. She chopped wood. She fed the cattle and mucked out the stalls and repaired a section of fence that had blown down in a storm. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her back ached every night. But she didn't complain, and she didn't quit. Cole watched her with something that might have been respect. "You don't have to do all this," he said one morning as she came in from the barn, covered in mud and sweat. "You can't, so I will." "That's not what I meant." He shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. "I meant, you're doing more than I hired you for." "You didn't hire me. You got stuck with me." She poured herself coffee and sat down across from him. "I'm earning my keep. That's all." He studied her face, and she met his gaze without flinching. "You always this stubborn?" he asked. "You always this suspicious?" The corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, but it was close. "Yeah. Then I guess we're even." After that, something eased between them. Not friendship, neither of them knew how to do that, but a kind of mutual acknowledgement. She worked. He recovered. And slowly, the ranch started to look less like a place waiting to die. By the time Cole was back on his feet, Lena had reorganized the barn, repaired 3 sections of fence, and planted a small vegetable garden behind the house. She'd also found his father's rifle in the back of a closet and taught herself to shoot by practicing on fence posts. Cole found her out there one afternoon, lining up another shot. "You planning to shoot someone?" he called. She lowered the rifle and turned. "Planning to shoot dinner. You got any objections?" He walked closer, hands in his pockets. "You know how to hunt?" "No, but I know how to learn." He almost smiled again. "Come on, I'll show you." They spent the rest of the afternoon tracking rabbits through the scrub. Cole moved like he was part of the landscape, silent, efficient, reading signs in the dirt that Lena couldn't see. He showed her how to stay downwind, how to wait, how to breathe before the shot. When she finally brought down a rabbit, clean through the chest, he nodded. Good. It was the closest thing to praise she'd ever heard from him. That night they ate fresh meat for the first time in weeks, and Lena felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not happiness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. April came in cold and wet, and with it came trouble. Lena was in the garden when she heard the horses, 3 riders coming up the road fast, kicking up mud. She straightened and shaded her eyes, watching as they pulled to a stop in front of the house. Cole came out onto the porch, and his whole body went tense. Garrett, he said flatly. The old man from the train station grinned down at him. He had 2 others with him, younger men, ranch hands by the look of them. Heard you got yourself some help, Cole, Garrett said. Thought I'd come see how the wrong bride's working out. Lena's hands tightened on the garden spade. She's working fine, Cole said. You can leave now. Now hold on, we're just being neighborly. Garrett's eyes found Lena and stayed there. You put her to work in the dirt already? That's cold, even for you. My business, not yours. Sure. Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. But see, word around town is you got yourself a live-in woman you ain't even married to. Some folks are wondering if that's proper. Cole's jaw tightened. Those folks can mind their own affairs. Can't do that when it's causing scandal, Cole. One of the younger men spoke up, smirking. Maybe you ought to make an honest woman of her, or send her back where she came from. Lena had heard enough. She walked toward them slowly, still holding the spade. All 3 men watched her approach. I'm working for room and board, she said evenly. Same as any ranch hand. If you got a problem with that, say it plain. Garrett laughed. You got some fire in you, don't you? That why Cole kept you around? Cole kept me around because I work, which is more than you're doing right now. The younger men bristled, but Garrett just grinned wider. Careful, girl. You're new here. Don't know how things work yet. I know how things work everywhere, Lena shot back. Men talk, women work. And when the talking's done, the work's still there waiting. Garrett's grin faded. Cole stepped off the porch. You said your piece. Now, get off my land. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Garrett spat in the dirt and pulled his horse around. You're making a mistake, Cole, he called as they rode off. Mark my words. When they were gone, Cole turned to Lena. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did. She looked at him steadily. They came here to humiliate you. I wasn't going to let them. Something passed between them then. A recognition, a shift. Cole nodded slowly. Appreciate it. Don't mention it. But that night, as Lena lay in her narrow bed listening to the wind, she realized something had changed. This wasn't just survival anymore. This wasn't just earning her keep. She was starting to care about the ranch, about the work, about him. And that was dangerous. May brought warmth and longer days, and with them, a rhythm that felt almost normal. Lena and Cole worked side by side now, their movements synchronized by routine. She learned to ride, awkwardly at first, but with growing confidence. He taught her to rope, to brand, to read the weather in the shape of clouds. They spoke more. Not a lot, but enough. Small conversations about the work, about the land, about nothing in particular. She learned things about him. That he'd inherited the ranch at 23 when his father died of pneumonia. That he'd been engaged once, years ago, to a woman from Cheyenne who'd left him for a banker. That he read books in the evenings, technical manuals mostly, but also poetry, which surprised her. He learned things about her too. That she'd been orphaned at 12 and raised herself on factory wages. That she'd nearly married once to a man who'd beaten her badly enough to leave scars. That she'd chosen the uncertainty of the West over the certainty of dying poor in Chicago. They didn't talk about feelings. Neither of them knew how. But sometimes, working together in the barn or sitting across from each other at dinner, Lena would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. And sometimes, late at night, she'd lie awake thinking about the way his hands moved when he worked, strong and sure and careful. It meant nothing. It couldn't mean anything. She was the wrong bride. The mistake. The woman he'd been forced to keep. But then came the storm. It hit on a Tuesday in late May, a freak cold front that turned the sky black and dropped the temperature 30 degrees in an hour. Lena was out checking the cattle when the first drops fell, and by the time she made it back to the barn, the rain was horizontal, driven by wind that screamed like something alive. Cole found her there, soaked and shaking. "House!" he yelled over the wind. "Now!" They ran together through the downpour and burst through the door into the sudden quiet of the house. Lena stood dripping on the floor, her teeth chattering. Cole grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Get those wet things off," he ordered. "I'll start the fire." She changed in her room, fingers numb and clumsy, and came back out to find him feeding logs into the fireplace. The flames caught and spread, filling the room with warmth and light. Outside, the storm hammered at the walls. They sat together on the floor in front of the fire, wrapped in blankets, listening to the wind try to tear the roof off. "This happen often?" Lena asked. "Once or twice a year. Usually doesn't last long." "How long's long?" "Day? Maybe 2. She nodded and pulled the blanket tighter. They sat in silence for a while. Then Cole spoke, his voice quiet. "You ever regret it, coming here?" Lena thought about it. About the cold platform, the hostile stares, the backbreaking work, the loneliness. "No," she said. "You?" "Regret what?" "Letting me stay." He looked at her then, and in the firelight, his face was different, softer, more open. "No," he said. "I don't." Something shifted in the air between them. Lena felt it, felt the weight of all the things they hadn't said, all the careful distance they'd maintained, all the walls they'd built. And sitting there in the warm glow of the fire while the storm raged outside, those walls felt thinner than they'd ever been. "Cole, don't." He cut her off, but gently. "Don't say it. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I'm not good at this." He stared into the fire. "Never have been. I don't know what this is." "Neither do I." "But you feel it." It wasn't a question. Lena swallowed. "Yeah, I feel it." Cole turned to look at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something raw in his eyes. Something unguarded. "You're not what I wanted," he said quietly. "You're nothing like what I thought I needed." "I know." "But you're..." He stopped. Started again. "You're the only thing that's made sense in a long time." Lena's breath caught. "We don't have to figure it all out tonight," she said. "We can just see what happens." Cole nodded slowly. "Yeah, we can do that." They sat together until the fire burned low and the storm outside began to quiet. And when Lena finally stood to go to her room, Cole caught her hand. "Lena." She looked back. "I'm glad you stayed." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. "So am I." The storm passed by morning, leaving the land washed clean and gleaming. Lena woke early and found Cole already outside, surveying the damage. A section of fence had blown down. The chicken coop had lost its roof, but the house and barn stood solid. They worked together to repair what they could, and the day passed in comfortable silence. That night, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the distant hills, and Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. It lasted exactly 3 more days. On Friday afternoon, the same train that had brought Lena to Medicine Bow brought someone else. Cole had gone to town for supplies, and Lena was alone when she heard the wagon coming up the road. She set down the bread dough she was kneading and went to the door. A hired carriage pulled to a stop in front of the house. The driver climbed down and opened the passenger door. And out stepped the most beautiful woman Lena had ever seen. She was young, maybe 25, with pale blonde hair pinned in perfect curls beneath a fashionable hat. Her dress was silk, her gloves spotless white. She moved with the kind of grace that came from never having worked a day in her life. Lena's stomach dropped. The woman looked at the house, then at Lena, and smiled. "Hello," she said in a voice like honey. "I'm looking for Cole Maddox. I'm Constance Hartwell." The perfect bride had arrived. Lena stood in the doorway with flowers still dusting her hands, staring at the woman who represented everything she wasn't. Constance Hartwell looked like she'd stepped out of a painting, all soft edges and careful beauty, the kind that came from never having to fight for anything. "I'm sorry," Lena said, finding her voice. "Did you say Constance Hartwell?" "Yes." The woman's smile didn't waver. "I know I'm dreadfully late. The agency must have sent word that I was delayed, but I'm here now." She glanced past Lena into the house. "Is Mr. Maddox at home?" Lena's mind was racing. This was the woman from the photograph. The woman Cole had paid for. The woman who was supposed to be here 3 months ago instead of Lena. "He's in town," Lena said carefully, "getting supplies." "Oh." Constance looked disappointed, then brightened. "Well, I suppose that gives us time to get acquainted. You must be the housekeeper?" The word landed like a slap, though Constance's tone held no malice. Just assumption, just the natural conclusion when you looked at Lena, rough hands, simple dress, dirt under her fingernails, and compared her to the silk-clad woman on the doorstep. "Something like that," Lena said. "How wonderful! I'm sure we'll work together beautifully." Constance turned to the driver. "Thomas, would you bring my trunks inside? I have 4 of them." 4 trunks. Lena had arrived with 1 canvas bag. She stepped back and let them in, watching as the driver hauled luggage that probably cost more than everything Lena had ever owned. Constance drifted through the main room, her nose wrinkling slightly at the simple furniture and bare walls. "It's rather rustic, isn't it?" She touched the back of a chair like she wasn't sure it was clean. "But I suppose that's to be expected out here. I'm sure with some proper furnishings and perhaps some wallpaper, it could be quite charming." Lena said nothing. She was trying to figure out what to do, what to say, how to handle this. Cole would be back in an hour, maybe less. And then what? Constance was still talking. "The journey was absolutely harrowing. 3 days on the train, and the accommodations were simply dreadful. I had to share a car with a woman who brought chickens. Can you imagine?" She laughed, a delicate sound. "But I'm here now, and that's what matters. I'm so looking forward to meeting my intended. Tell me, what's he like? The letters were rather brief." "He's—" Lena stopped. What could she say? That Cole was hard and closed off and silent? That he was also decent and fair and stronger than anyone she'd ever met? That something had started between them that she couldn't name but couldn't ignore? "He's a good man," she said finally. "I'm sure he is." Constance settled onto the chair with obvious reluctance. "Would you mind terribly making some tea? I'm absolutely parched." Lena went to the kitchen and put the kettle on with hands that shook slightly. Through the window, she could see the road stretching toward town. Any minute now, Cole's wagon would appear on the horizon, and her whole world would shift again. She'd known this might happen, known that she had no claim on him, no right to expect anything. She was the mistake, the substitute, the woman who'd lied her way onto a train and into his life. Constance was the real deal, the one he'd chosen, the one he'd paid for. But that didn't make it hurt less. The kettle whistled. Lena poured tea into the 2 decent cups they owned and brought them out. Constance accepted hers with a gracious nod. "You know," she said, "I feel I should explain why I'm so late. The truth is, I was having second thoughts. Boston is all I've ever known, and the West seems so far away, so wild. I actually sent word to the agency that I wouldn't be coming." She sipped her tea. "But then I received Mr. Maddox's letters, and something about his words convinced me to reconsider. He seemed like a man of substance, of character. So I changed my mind and came after all." Lena's hands tightened on her cup. "He didn't get word that you were coming." "Oh dear. Well, that explains the lack of welcome." Constance laughed again. "I suppose this is quite a surprise then, for all of us." The sound of wagon wheels on the road made them both look up. Through the window, Lena saw Cole pulling to a stop near the barn. He climbed down slowly, moving like a man who'd spent the day lifting feed sacks and dealing with merchants. He didn't look toward the house yet, didn't see the carriage or the stranger sitting in his front room. Lena stood. "That's him." Constance rose quickly, smoothing her skirts and patting her hair. "How do I look?" "Perfect," Lena said, and meant it in the worst possible way. Cole was halfway to the house when he spotted the carriage. He stopped, his head tilting in that way he had when he was trying to figure something out. Then he continued walking, slower now, more wary. He came through the door and stopped dead. His eyes went to Constance first, took in the expensive dress, the careful beauty, the expectant smile. Then they shifted to Lena, and she saw confusion flicker across his face. "Mr. Maddox." Constance stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Constance Hartwell. I know this must be quite a shock, and I apologize for arriving unannounced. There was a terrible mix-up with the agency, but I'm here now, and I'm so very pleased to finally meet you." Cole didn't take her hand. He was still looking at Lena. "What's going on?" he asked. "I'm your bride," Constance said, a note of uncertainty creeping into her voice. "From the matrimonial agency? We've been corresponding for months." "That was months ago," Cole said flatly. "You didn't come." "I know, and I'm terribly sorry about that. I explained to your housekeeper. There were complications, but they're resolved now. I'm here to honor our agreement." Cole's jaw tightened. He still hadn't looked away from Lena. "She's not my housekeeper," he said. Constance blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry, I assumed—" "You assumed wrong." He finally turned to face Constance fully. "Miss Hartwell, I don't know what you were told, but that agreement ended when you didn't show up. I've moved on." "Moved on?" Constance looked between them, and Lena saw the moment understanding dawned. "Oh, I see." Her voice went cold. "And the agency? Did you inform them you'd taken up with the help?" "Watch yourself," Cole said, and there was warning in his tone. "I'm simply trying to understand the situation." Constance drew herself up. "I traveled all this way in good faith, expecting to fulfill a contract that cost you $100, if I recall correctly. Surely that entitles me to some consideration." "You want consideration?" Cole's voice was dangerously quiet. "Fine. I'll give you a bed for the night and money for a ticket back east tomorrow. That's all the consideration you're getting." "That's hardly fair." "Fair?" Cole took a step forward. "You didn't show up. You left me standing on that platform looking like a fool in front of the whole town. You think that was fair?" Constance's perfect composure cracked slightly. "I made a mistake. I'm trying to correct it. 3 months too late. I have rights, legal rights. We have a contract." "No," Cole said. "We have a letter from an agency that placed an order. That order wasn't filled. Contract's void." "I could take you to court." "You could try." They stared at each other, and Lena felt like she was watching something break that had never been whole to begin with. She should have felt victorious, should have felt relieved that Cole was choosing her, defending her, sending Constance away. Instead, she felt sick. Because Constance was right about one thing. Cole had paid for a refined bride, had wanted someone exactly like the woman standing in his house right now. And instead, he'd gotten Lena. Had that really changed? Or was he just being stubborn, too proud to admit he'd rather have what he'd ordered? "Cole," she said quietly. He turned to her, and his expression softened immediately. "What?" "Maybe you should think about this." "There's nothing to think about. She came all this way, and you did have an agreement." Cole stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "What are you saying?" Lena forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'm saying maybe this is what's supposed to happen. Maybe I was just filling a gap until the right person showed up." "Don't." His voice was rough. "Don't do that. I'm being practical." "You're being an idiot." Constance made a small sound of protest, but Cole ignored her. He crossed to Lena in 3 strides and caught her shoulders. "Listen to me," he said. "I don't want her. I want you. You don't even know what you want. I know I don't want someone who runs away when things get hard. I know I don't want someone who shows up 3 months late expecting everything to be the same. And I know—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I know I don't want to lose what we've built here." Lena felt her throat tighten. "We haven't built anything. I've been working off a debt." "That's bullshit, and you know it." Behind them, Constance cleared her throat. "Perhaps I should give you two some privacy." "Good idea," Cole said without looking at her. "Your room's the second door on the left. Stay there." Constance opened her mouth to argue, saw the look on Cole's face, and thought better of it. She gathered her skirts and swept down the hallway, closing the door behind her with more force than necessary. Cole turned back to Lena. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Trying to push me toward her." trying to make this easy. Because it should be easy. Lena pulled away from him. Look at her, Cole. She's everything you asked for. Refined, educated, proper. She's what you wanted. 3 months ago, maybe, before I knew any better. People don't change that fast. Don't they? He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. You think I'm the same person I was when you stepped off that train? You think I still want some fragile city woman who can't handle a hard day's work? I think you want what you paid for. I paid for a fantasy. His voice dropped. You gave me something real. Lena closed her eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it scared her. This is a mess, she said. Yeah, it is. What are we supposed to do? Cole was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was steady. We're supposed to tell the truth. So, here's mine. I don't love her. I don't even know her. But you... He stopped, started again. You're the first thing in 3 years that's made this place feel like home instead of just work. And I'm not giving that up because some woman decided to show up and complicate things. She has a legal claim. Let her try to prove it. I'll fight her in every court in Wyoming if I have to. That's stupid, probably. But I'm doing it anyway. Lena opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked. Saw the determination in his face, the set of his jaw, the way his hands were clenched at his sides like he was ready for a fight. You're an impossible man, she said. You're a stubborn woman. We're both idiots. Agreed. He almost smiled. So what do you say? You want to be idiots together? Lena wanted to say yes, wanted to close the distance between them and stop fighting what she felt. But doubt was a hard thing to kill. What if you regret it? She asked quietly. What if you wake up in a year and wish you'd chosen differently? What if I don't? That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. He took a step closer. Lena, I can't promise you perfect. Can't promise this'll be easy. But I can promise I'm not looking back. Not at her, not at what I thought I wanted. I'm here, with you. If you'll have me. She studied his face, searching for doubt and finding none. He meant it, every word. Okay, she said finally. Okay? Okay, you idiot. We'll do this. Cole's whole body relaxed. He reached for her hand and she let him take it. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet. We still have to deal with her. I'll handle it. How? Same way I handle everything, directly. The next morning, Cole was as good as his word. He woke before dawn, made coffee, and knocked on Constance's door while Lena was still getting dressed. By the time Lena came out, they were sitting at the table in tense silence. Constance looked like she hadn't slept. Her perfect hair was slightly mussed, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Miss Hartwell and I have been discussing the situation, Cole said when Lena appeared. We've come to an agreement. What kind of agreement? Lena asked warily. Constance spoke before Cole could. Mr. Maddox has offered me $200, double what he paid the agency, if I leave quietly and sign a release stating I have no claim on him or this property. Lena looked at Cole. Where are you getting $200? Savings. I've been putting aside for a new barn, but this is more important. Cole, that's your whole... It's settled, he said firmly. Miss Hartwell takes the money. I take her to town this morning. She gets on the eastbound train, and that's the end of it. Constance stood. I'll need a few hours to pack. You've got one, Cole said. She left without another word, and Lena sat down heavily. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yeah, I did. That was your barn money. Barns can wait. You can't. Lena shook her head, but she was almost smiling. You're going to regret this. Keep saying that. Maybe eventually I'll believe you. An hour later, Cole loaded Constance's 4 trunks into the wagon and helped her up onto the seat. She didn't look at Lena, didn't say goodbye, just sat with her spine straight and her eyes fixed on the horizon. Cole climbed up beside her and took the reins. Before he left, he looked back at Lena. I'll be back by noon, he said. I'll be here. She watched them drive away and tried not to think about how good they looked together, him tall and strong, her delicate and beautiful. Tried not to think about the fact that in another life, another time, that could have been his future. Instead, she went inside and started cleaning. It was what she always did when her mind was too loud. Work until the thoughts quieted down. She was scrubbing the kitchen floor when she heard riders approaching. Not one horse, several. She went to the window and felt her stomach drop. Garrett was back, and this time he'd brought more than 3 men. Lena dried her hands and went outside. There were 6 of them now, all mounted, all watching her with expressions that ranged from amused to hostile. "Where's Cole?" Garrett asked. "Town." "That's so. Funny thing, we just saw him heading that way with a fancy lady. Real pretty thing. That the bride he was supposed to get?" Lena said nothing. "Heard she showed up yesterday," Garrett continued. "Heard there was quite a scene. Now here's what I'm wondering. Did Cole finally come to his senses and get rid of you? Or is he running 2 women now? Cole's business is his own." "Not when it affects the community, it ain't," one of the other men spoke up. "We got standards here. Can't have a man living in sin with some woman while he's courting another." "He's not courting anyone." "That's not what it looked like to me." Lena's hands curled into fists. "You got something to say it plain." Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. "Here's what's plain, girl. This town's been watching you and Cole for months now, watching you live under his roof, unwed and unspoken for. Some folks think that's a disgrace. Some folks think something ought to be done about it." "What kind of something?" "The kind where you leave, peaceful-like, before there's trouble." "I'm not leaving." "You sure about that?" Another man spoke up. "Because we could make things real uncomfortable for you, and for Cole." "You threatening me?" "Just giving friendly advice." Lena took a step forward. "Here's my advice. Get off this property before Cole gets back. Because when he finds out you came here while he was gone, while I was alone, he's going to be real unhappy. And Cole Maddox unhappy is something you don't want to see." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "You got a mouth on you. And you got too much time on your hands. Go find something useful to do." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Garrett spat and pulled his horse around. "This ain't over," he said. "Looking forward to it." They rode off, and Lena stood watching until they were out of sight. Then she went inside and got the rifle from above the fireplace. She checked it was loaded and set it by the door. Cole got back an hour later and found her sitting on the porch with the rifle across her knees. "What happened?" he asked immediately. She told him. His face went dark. "They threatened you." "They tried." "Same thing." He paced across the porch, agitated. "Did they touch you?" "No, I handled it." "You shouldn't have had to." He stopped and looked at her. "This is my fault." "How's that?" "I brought you here, put you in this position. I'm exactly where I want to be." "Lena, Cole, listen to me." She stood and set the rifle aside. "Those men came here because they're small and mean and got nothing better to do than police other people's lives. That's not on you. And it's not going to make me leave. They could hurt you. They could try. I'm serious. So am I." She crossed to him. "You think I survived this long by running every time someone threatened me? I've been threatened by worse than Garrett and his friends. I'm still here." Cole pulled her close, and she let him. His heart was pounding against her cheek. "I can't lose you," he said quietly. "You won't. Promise me." "I promise." They stood like that for a long time, and Lena felt something settle between them. Something solid. It wasn't love yet. Neither of them would have called it that. But it was close. It was the foundation love could build on, given time. But time, as it turned out, was something they were running out of. The next week, Garrett filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff. The charge? Public indecency. The claim? Cole Maddox was living in sin with a woman not his wife, corrupting public morals and setting a bad example. The sheriff, a man named Dutch, who'd known Cole's father, rode out to deliver the summons personally. He looked embarrassed doing it. "I know it's horseshit, Cole," he said, "but Garrett got 3 other men to sign the complaint. That makes it official. You got to appear in front of Judge Morris next Tuesday." "And say what?" "Say whatever you want. But Morris is old-fashioned. He might order you to marry her or send her away. Those are usually the options." After Dutch left, Cole and Lena sat at the table in silence. "We could get married," Cole said finally. "That's not how I want it to happen." "Neither do I. But if it keeps you here, it won't mean anything if we're forced into it. It'll mean you don't have to leave." Lena reached across the table and took his hand. "Give me another option. I'm working on it. But by Monday, they still didn't have a plan. And on Tuesday morning, they rode into town together to face the judge. The hearing was held in the church, the only building big enough to hold everyone who showed up. It seemed like the whole town had turned out to watch. Lena sat in the front row while Cole stood before Judge Morris, a stern man with white hair and cold eyes. Garrett presented his case. Cole lived with Lena Voss, unmarried and without chaperone. She worked for him but slept in his house. They were seen together constantly, eating meals, working side by side. It was improper. It was sinful. It needed to stop. Judge Morris listened without expression. When Garrett finished, he turned to Cole. "Mr. Maddox, what do you have to say?" Cole stood. "Miss Voss is my employee. She works for room and board. There's nothing improper about it. An unmarried woman living under your roof with no chaperone? I'd call that plenty improper. Then half the ranches in Wyoming are improper. Plenty of men hire help and house them. Plenty of men hire other men. You hired a woman. Because she's the best worker I could find. That's irrelevant." "How's that irrelevant?" "I needed help. She needed work. We made an arrangement. An arrangement that looks like something else entirely." Cole's jaw tightened. "If you're accusing me of something, Judge, say it plain. I'm saying it looks bad. And in my experience, when something looks bad, it usually is bad." "Your experience is wrong." Morris's eyes went hard. "Watch your tone, son." Lena couldn't sit quiet anymore. She stood. "Judge Morris, may I speak?" He looked at her with distaste. "This is highly irregular. So's having my life decided by men who don't know me." A murmur went through the crowd. Morris frowned. "You have 1 minute." Lena walked to stand beside Cole. "I came here because I had nowhere else to go. Cole gave me work when I needed it. He's been nothing but respectful. If people want to see something wrong in that, that's their problem, not ours. The problem, Miss Voss, is that you're living in a situation that gives the appearance of impropriety. The appearance, not the reality. In the eyes of the law, they're the same thing." "Then the law's stupid." Another murmur, louder this time. Morris's face went red. "That's enough. I've heard all I need to hear." He stood. "Mr. Maddox, Miss Voss, you have 2 options. You can marry within the week, legitimizing this arrangement, or Miss Voss can leave town immediately. Those are your choices. I'll expect your decision by Friday." He banged his gavel, and it was over. Outside, people stared as Lena and Cole walked to their wagon. Some looked sympathetic. Most just looked entertained. This was the best gossip Medicine Bow had seen in years. They rode home in silence. When they got there, Lena went straight to her room and started packing her bag. Cole appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing? What does it look like?" "Lena, stop. I'm not going to force you to marry me just so I can stay." "Who says you're forcing me?" "Everyone, the whole damn town." Cole crossed the room and took the bag from her hands. "I don't care what they think." "Well, I do." Lena's voice cracked. "I care that people look at you and see someone who got trapped, someone who settled. Is that what you think? That you're settling?" "I think we're both settling, and maybe that's okay. Maybe that's all this ever was. 2 people making the best of a bad situation." Cole caught her face in his hands. "Look at me." She did, reluctantly. "If I ask you to marry me," he said slowly, "it won't be because some judge told me to. It won't be to save face or avoid scandal. It'll be because I want to, because I choose to. You understand?" "Cole, do you understand?" Lena nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." He let her go and stepped back. "Now we've got until Friday to figure this out. So let's stop fighting each other and start figuring out what we actually want." "What do you want?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I want you to stay. However that happens, whatever it takes. I want you to stay." Lena felt something break open in her chest. "Okay. Okay? Okay. I'll stay. Even if it means marrying me? Even if it means that." Cole pulled her close, and they stood there together while the wind howled outside and the future hung uncertain and heavy between them. Friday came too fast. They still hadn't decided what to do. But when they rode into town to give the judge their answer, something had changed between them. Some wall had finally come down. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. That had to be enough. They were halfway to town when Cole pulled the wagon off the road. Lena looked at him. "What are you doing?" "Changing my mind." He set the brake and turned to face her. "I'm not going in there and letting Morris force us into anything. Not marriage. Not you leaving. None of it." "Cole, we don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." His eyes were hard. "We could leave. Pack up tonight and head to Montana or Colorado. Start over where nobody knows us and nobody cares." Lena stared at him. "You'd leave your ranch? Your father's land?" "For you, yeah." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Lena felt her chest tighten. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," she said. "Probably. You'd regret it within a month." "Maybe, but I'd regret losing you more." Lena looked away toward the distant town where Judge Morris was waiting, where Garrett and his friends were probably already gathering to watch the show, where the whole damn place would get to see her and Cole forced into a corner like animals. "We're not running," she said. "Then what are we doing?" She turned back to him. "We're going to give them what they want, but on our terms." "What's that mean?" "It means we get married. Today. Right now. Before we even get to town." Cole frowned. "How?" "There's a circuit preacher who works the ranches north of here. Dutch mentioned him once. Said he does weddings, funerals, whatever people need. We find him, we get married, and then we go tell Morris it's already done. He can't order us to do something we've already done." "That's..." Cole stopped. A slow smile spread across his face. "That's actually smart." "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not. I'm impressed." He picked up the reins again. "You know where this preacher is?" "Dutch said he works the Simpson place on Thursdays. That's about 5 miles north." Cole turned the wagon around without another word. They found Preacher Daniels at the Simpson ranch, helping Old Man Simpson repair a fence. He was a small, weathered man in his 60s, with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd done more manual labor than preaching. "Help you folks?" he asked as they approached. "We need to get married," Cole said bluntly. "Today. Now, if possible." Daniels looked between them. "You in some kind of trouble?" "The legal kind," Lena said. "Judge Morris is trying to force our hand. We want to beat him to it." "Ah." Daniels set down his hammer. "Morris? That man's got more rules than sense." He studied them both. "You two actually want to get married, or are you just trying to avoid a fine?" Cole glanced at Lena. She met his eyes and saw the question there. "We want to," she said quietly. "Just not the way everyone else wants us to." "Good enough for me." Daniels wiped his hands on his pants. "You got rings?" They looked at each other. "No," Cole said. "Witnesses?" "Just us." Daniels sighed. "Well, it ain't traditional, but I've done worse." "Simpson," he called toward the house. "Get your wife. I need witnesses." 10 minutes later, they stood in the Simpsons' front yard with the mountains rising behind them and the sky stretching endless overhead. Mrs. Simpson had brought out a handful of wildflowers that Lena held without really seeing them. Her hands were shaking. Cole noticed. He took her hand and squeezed it once. "You sure about this?" he asked, low enough that only she could hear. "Are you?" "I asked first." "Yes," she said. "I'm sure. Even though I'm mean and closed off and terrible at talking. Even though I'm stubborn and mouthy and not what you wanted. You're exactly what I wanted. Just took me a while to figure it out." Preacher Daniels cleared his throat. "If you two are done negotiating, we can start." The ceremony was short. Daniels didn't have a book, so he spoke from memory, his voice steady and sure. He talked about commitment and choosing each other every day and building something that could weather storms. He didn't mention love, which Lena appreciated. Love felt too big, too undefined. What she and Cole had was simpler and maybe stronger for it. When Daniels asked if they took each other, they both said yes. When he asked for rings, and they had none, he told them to use whatever they had in their pockets. Cole pulled out a bent nail. Lena had a small stone she'd found by the creek. They exchanged them solemnly, and Mrs. Simpson cried. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Daniel said. "You may kiss if you're so inclined." Cole looked at Lena. They'd never kissed, never even come close. For a moment, she thought he might skip it entirely. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, brief and awkward and sincere. When he pulled back, his ears were red. "Well," he said, "that's done." "Yeah, Shay," Lena managed. "It is." They paid Daniels with the last of Cole's ready cash and got back in the wagon. As they drove toward town, Lena kept turning the bent nail over in her fingers. It was ridiculous. A piece of scrap metal instead of gold. But it felt right somehow. Real. "You okay?" Cole asked. "I just got married in a stranger's yard with a nail for a ring. I'm great." "Having second thoughts?" "About 100 of them. You?" "At least that many." They looked at each other and started laughing. It felt good, like releasing pressure they'd been holding for months. By the time they reached town, the laughter had faded, but something else had settled in its place. A kind of quiet certainty. They'd made their choice. Now they had to live with it. Judge Morris was waiting in his office when they arrived. So was Sheriff Dutch, Garrett, and half a dozen other townspeople who'd come to watch the drama unfold. "You're late," Morris said as they entered. "I was about to rule in absentia." "We're not late," Cole said. "We're married." The room went silent. Morris's face turned purple. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. We got married this morning. Preacher Daniels performed the ceremony. It's legal and binding." You can't," Morris sputtered. "I specifically ordered you to wait until I'd made my ruling. You ordered us to marry or separate. We married. That's what you wanted, isn't it? Not like this." "Like what?" "We're married. Problem solved." Garrett stood up from where he'd been leaning against the wall. "This is bullshit. They're lying." "We're not," Lena said. She held up the bent nail on her finger. "We have rings and witnesses and a preacher's signature. What more do you need?" "A real ceremony. In a church. With proper what?" Cole cut him off. "Proper humiliation? Proper control?" "Sorry, Garrett. You don't get that satisfaction." Morris banged his desk. "This is contempt. I could hold you both in violation." "Of what law?" Dutch spoke up from the corner. Everyone turned to look at him. He shrugged. "They got married by a licensed preacher with witnesses. That's legal in Wyoming. You can't punish them for following your order." "I didn't order them to sneak around behind my back." "You didn't specify how or when, just that they had to marry or separate. They married." Dutch looked at Cole and Lena, and there was something like approval in his eyes. "Seems to me the matter's settled." Morris looked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Dutch was right. They'd followed the letter of his order, if not the spirit. "Fine," he said through clenched teeth. "The complaint is dismissed. But know this, Maddox, you've made enemies today. People don't like being made fools of." "People should mind their own business," Cole said. They left before Morris could come up with another objection. Outside, people had gathered on the street, waiting for news. When they saw Cole and Lena emerge, the whispers started immediately. "Ignore them," Cole said quietly. "I intend to." They climbed into the wagon and headed home. Neither of them spoke until they were well outside town. "That went better than expected," Lena said finally. "Did it?" "Because I'm pretty sure we just declared war on half the county." "They declared war first. We just fought back." Cole glanced at her. "You're not worried?" "About what? Garrett and his friends? They're cowards. They'll talk and bluster, but they won't do anything." "You sound pretty sure about that." "I've dealt with men like them my whole life. They only have power if you're afraid of them. And you're not afraid." "Not of them?" She looked down at the bent nail on her finger. "I'm afraid of other things." "Like what?" "Like waking up and realizing this was a mistake. Like you looking at me in 5 years and wishing you'd chosen different." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm afraid you'll figure out you deserve better and leave." Lena turned to stare at him. "Better than what? A ranch and honest work and a man who doesn't hit me?" "A man who knows how to talk to you, who can give you more than just survival." "I don't want more than survival, Cole. I want survival with someone who won't quit on me when things get hard. You think that's common? You think I can find that anywhere?" He looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his face. "No, I guess not. So stop worrying about me leaving. I'm not going anywhere." Even when I'm impossible? Especially then. Somebody's got to keep you honest. The corner of his mouth twitched. That a promise, Mrs. Maddox? The name landed strange. Mrs. Maddox. Lena Maddox. It didn't feel real yet. Yeah, she said. That's a promise. They got home as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Cole unhitched the horses while Lena went inside to start dinner. It felt normal, ordinary, like nothing had changed, except everything had. They ate in comfortable silence, and afterward Cole built up the fire while Lena cleaned the dishes. When she finished, she found him standing by the window, staring out at the dark land. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. How different this day was from what I imagined. "When you sent that letter to the agency?" "Yeah, I thought I'd get a quiet ceremony with a stranger. Thought I'd feel, I don't know, satisfied maybe. Like I'd checked something off a list. And instead?" He turned to face her. "Instead, I married someone I actually give a damn about. And I feel terrified." Lena crossed to him. "That makes two of us." "Yeah?" "Yeah. I've never had anything worth losing before. It's scary." Cole reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tentative, like he wasn't sure he had the right. "We should probably figure out the sleeping arrangements," he said. Lena's stomach flipped. She'd been trying not to think about that. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "What do you want?" "I asked first." Cole sighed. "I want you to be comfortable. That's what matters." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now?" He dropped his hand. "Look, we don't have to. We can keep things the way they've been. Separate rooms. Take our time." "That what you want?" "I want you to not feel pressured. Cole, we're married. That comes with certain expectations." "Not for me, it doesn't. Not unless you want it to." Lena studied his face and saw he meant it. There was no demand there, no assumption. Just an offer to take this at whatever pace she could handle. Something in her chest loosened. "Okay," she said. "We'll take it slow." "Okay." They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Cole cleared his throat. "I should probably check the barn before bed." "I'll see you in the morning." "Yeah, morning." He left and Lena went to her room. She sat on the bed and looked at the bent nail on her finger, trying to process everything that had happened. She'd woken up unmarried and uncertain. Now she was a wife. Cole Maddox's wife. It should have felt wrong, should have felt like a trap. Instead, it just felt like the next step in a journey she'd started the day she stepped off that train. She was still sitting there when she heard the knock on her door. "Yeah?" Cole opened it a crack. "Forgot to say goodnight." "Good night, Cole." He hesitated. "Good night, Lena." He closed the door, and she listened to his footsteps retreat down the hall. Then she lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally came. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. They were married now, which changed some things and left others exactly the same. They still worked side by side, still ate meals together, still argued about stupid things like how much salt to put in the stew. But there were differences too. Small ones. Cole touched her more, a hand on her back as he passed, fingers brushing when they reached for the same tool. He asked her opinion on things he used to decide alone. And sometimes, late at night, she'd hear him moving around in his room and wonder if he was lying awake thinking about her the way she thought about him. The town, meanwhile, couldn't decide what to make of them. Some people seemed genuinely happy they'd figured things out. Others, like Garrett, remained hostile. But nobody bothered them directly. The marriage had diffused the immediate crisis, even if it hadn't won them any friends. Then, 3 weeks after the wedding, everything changed again. Lena was in town picking up supplies when she saw the boy. He was maybe 10 years old, skinny as a rail, with dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. He was standing outside the general store, clutching his side and trying not to cry. Lena stopped. "You all right?" The boy looked at her with pure terror and bolted. She stood there, confused, until Mrs. Patterson came out of the store. "Don't mind him," she said. "That's the Hendricks boy, Thomas. His father's mean as a snake. Beats him regular." Lena's blood went cold. "And nobody does anything? What's to do? Boy belongs to his father. Ain't our business how he raises him. It's our business if he's beating him." Mrs. Patterson shrugged. "Law says different. You can't take a man's child just because you don't like his methods. Lena wanted to argue, but Mrs. Patterson had already gone back inside. She looked around for the boy, but he'd disappeared into the alleys between buildings. She thought about him the whole ride home, about the fear in his eyes, about the way he'd been holding his ribs. That night, she told Cole, "I know about Thomas Hendricks," he said quietly. "Everyone does." "And nobody does anything? What can they do? His father owns a piece of land south of here. Keeps to himself mostly. Law won't intervene in family matters." "Family matters. He's beating a child." "Ah, I know. But unless someone's willing to take custody and prove Hendricks is unfit, there's nothing to be done." Lena stared at him. "We could take custody." Cole set down his fork. "Lena, I'm serious. We've got room. We could give him a home. We've been married 3 weeks. We're barely figuring out how to live together ourselves. So we'll figure it out with him too." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because taking a child from his father, even a bastard like Hendricks, requires proof of abuse that'll hold up in court, requires lawyers and money and time. And even if we manage all that, there's no guarantee we'd win. So we just let him suffer." Cole ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to think this through." "I have thought it through. That boy needs help. We can help him. What's to think about?" "Everything. What if we take him and can't protect him? What if Hendricks comes after him? After us? What if we do nothing and he dies?" Lena's voice cracked. "What if we have to live knowing we could have helped and didn't?" Cole stared at her. "This really matters to you?" "Yeah, it does." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "All right, we'll look into it." "You mean that?" "I mean, we'll talk to Dutch, see what our options are. But Lena," he caught her hand, "don't get your hopes up. This might not be possible. Or it might be exactly what we're supposed to do." Cole didn't argue. But the next day they rode into town together to talk to the sheriff. Dutch listened to their concern with a grim expression. When they finished, he sighed. "I've been waiting for someone to bring this up," he said. "Truth is, I've seen the bruises on that boy myself. But my hands are tied. Hendricks hasn't been convicted of anything, and the law's clear. A father has rights over his children." "Even when he's hurting them?" Lena demanded. "Even then. Unless you can prove sustained abuse and find someone willing to take custody, yeah." "We're willing," Cole said. Dutch looked surprised. "You two? You sure about that?" "No, but we're willing anyway. It won't be easy. Hendricks won't give him up without a fight. And you'll need a lawyer, which means money." "How much money?" "More than you've probably got. Custody cases can drag on for months." Cole and Lena exchanged a look. "We'll figure it out," Lena said. Dutch shook his head. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Little of both," Cole said. Over the next week, they met with a lawyer named Morrison who agreed to take their case. He was expensive but honest, and after reviewing the situation, he told them their chances were about 50-50. "You'll need evidence," he said. "Documentation of injuries, testimony from witnesses, anything that proves Hendricks is unfit." "How do we get that if nobody will talk?" Lena asked. "You convince them, or you catch him in the act." They started with the first option. Lena went door to door in town, asking people what they'd seen. Most refused to talk. Some admitted they'd noticed bruises but didn't want to get involved. A few, like Mrs. Patterson and the schoolteacher Miss Allen, agreed to testify if it came to that. Cole, meanwhile, watched the Hendricks place from a distance, documenting everything he saw. It wasn't much. Hendricks was careful not to beat the boy in public. But twice Cole saw Thomas limping, and once he saw the boy with a black eye so dark it was visible from 100 yards away. It took 3 weeks to build their case, 3 weeks of gathering evidence and depositions and legal paperwork, 3 weeks of watching Thomas from afar and seeing him get thinner, quieter, more broken. Finally, Morrison said they had enough. "I'm filing the petition tomorrow," he told them. "Judge Morris will set a hearing date within the month." "Morris?" Lena's heart sank. "The same judge who tried to force us apart? Only judge in the county, but he's fair when the law's on your side, and we've got a strong case." The petition was filed on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, the whole town knew, and by Thursday, Hendricks showed up at the ranch. Lena was alone when he arrived. Cole had gone to fix a fence in the north pasture. She heard the horse and came out to find a big man with a hard face sitting in her yard. "You the one trying to take my boy?" he asked. Lena's hand moved to the rifle leaning by the door. "I'm the one trying to save him." "Save him?" Hendricks spat. "From what? From you beating him half to death." His face went dark. "How I raise my son is my business." "Not when you're breaking his bones. You got no proof of that." "We've got plenty." Hendricks climbed down from his horse. He was easily 6'4", with hands like ham hocks. Lena's fingers tightened on the rifle. "I'm telling you once," he said. "Drop this case or you'll regret it." "That a threat?" "It's a promise." "Then I guess we both made promises today, because mine is that I'm not dropping anything." Hendricks took a step closer. "You think you're tough? You think that rifle makes you safe?" "I think if you take another step, we'll find out." They stared at each other. Then Hendricks smiled, mean and cold. "Your husband know you're starting wars you can't win?" "My husband knows exactly what I'm doing, and he's behind me all the way." "We'll see about that." Hendricks mounted his horse and rode off, kicking up dirt as he went. Lena stood there until he was out of sight, then went inside and sat down hard. Her hands were shaking. When Cole came home an hour later, she told him everything. His face went pale. "He threatened you." "He tried." "Lena, this is serious. If he's willing to come here, then we're doing the right thing. If he's this scared of losing Thomas, it means he knows we can win. Or it means he's dangerous. I've dealt with dangerous men before. Not like this." "Cole?" She caught his face in her hands. "We can't back down now. That boy is counting on us. He doesn't even know we're fighting for him." "Maybe not, but he will. And when he does, he'll know someone cared enough to try." Cole pulled her close and held her tight. "I can't lose you," he said into her hair. "Not to this, not to anything." "You won't, I promise." But even as she said it, Lena knew she couldn't guarantee that. The hearing was coming, and with it, a battle that would test everything they'd built. The hearing was set for the first Monday in July, and the week leading up to it felt like waiting for a storm that never broke. Cole barely slept. Lena caught him sitting at the kitchen table at 3 a.m, more than once, staring at nothing. "You need to rest," she told him on the third night she found him there. "Can't." He didn't look at her. "Keep thinking about what happens if we lose." "We won't." "You don't know that." "No, but I know we did everything we could. That has to count for something." Cole finally turned to face her. His eyes were shadowed, exhausted. "What if it doesn't? What if Morris rules against us and we have to watch that boy go back to a man who's going to punish him for this?" Lena sat down across from him. "Then we figure out another way. We don't give up. There might not be another way. There's always another way. You just have to be willing to find it." He reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was tight, almost desperate. "When did you get so damn stubborn?" "I was born this way. You just didn't notice until you were stuck with me." That got a small smile out of him. "Yeah, I noticed." They sat like that until the sky started to lighten, then went about their morning routine in silence. The work helped. It always did. But even as Lena fed the chickens and hauled water and checked on the garden, her mind kept circling back to the hearing, to Thomas, to everything that could go wrong. On Saturday, Morrison came by to prep them for court. He sat at their table with a stack of papers and went through what would happen, what they could expect, what questions they might face. "Hendricks will have his own lawyer," Morrison said. "A man named Cutler from Casper. He's good, mean. He'll try to paint you two as troublemakers who don't know anything about raising children." "We don't," Cole said bluntly. "Never claimed we did." "That's not the point. The point is you can provide a stable home and Hendricks can't. But Cutler's going to argue that blood matters more than stability, that a boy belongs with his father, no matter what." "Even if his father's killing him?" Lena demanded. "Even then, the law's on Hendricks' side by default. We have to prove he's unfit, and that's a high bar. We've got witnesses. We've got documentation." "We do, but it might not be enough." Morrison looked between them. "I need you both to be prepared for that possibility." "We're prepared," Cole said, though his voice was tight. Morrison nodded and gathered his papers. "One more thing. Thomas will be there. Hendricks has the right to bring him, and he will. He'll use it to show the court they're a family. You need to be ready for that. After Morrison left, Lena went outside and stood in the yard, staring at the mountains. She heard Cole come up behind her. You still sure about this? He asked. Are you? I asked first. She turned to face him. I'm sure. Even if we lose. Even if it all falls apart. I'm sure we tried. Cole nodded slowly. Yeah, me too. Sunday passed in a blur of final preparations. They cleaned the house top to bottom, even though nobody would see it. Mended clothes they'd already mended. Did all the small, useless tasks people do when they can't sit still. That night, Lena lay in her bed and listened to the wind. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. Either they'd walk out of that courtroom with the right to give Thomas a home, or they'd walk out knowing they'd failed him. She didn't sleep until almost dawn. Monday morning came bright and cold. They dressed in their best clothes, Cole in a suit that had belonged to his father, Lena in the only dress she owned that wasn't work-worn. They looked like strangers to each other, formal and stiff. The ride to town was silent. When they arrived, the church was already full. It seemed like everyone in the county had shown up to watch. Lena saw Garrett near the back, smirking, saw Mrs. Patterson and Miss Allen sitting together, looking nervous, saw Dutch standing by the door, his face grave, and near the front, sitting beside a lawyer in an expensive suit, was Hendricks. Thomas was next to him, small and silent, staring at his hands. He had new bruises on his face, fresh ones. Lena felt rage flood through her, so hot she could barely breathe. Cole saw it too. His jaw went tight, but he kept his face neutral as they took their seats across the aisle. Judge Morris entered, and the room went quiet. He looked older than Lena remembered, worn down by years of making decisions nobody thanked him for. He sat, arranged his papers, and called the court to order. This is a petition for custody, he began, his voice carrying across the silent room. Cole and Lena Maddox are seeking to remove Thomas Hendricks from his father's care on grounds of abuse and neglect. Mr. Hendricks contests this claim. We'll hear from both sides, then I'll make my ruling. He looked at Morrison. Counselor, you may begin. Morrison stood and laid out their case methodically. He called Miss Allen first. She testified that Thomas came to school with bruises regularly, that he flinched when anyone moved too fast, that he'd stopped participating in class over the past year. Did you report this to anyone? Morrison asked. I tried, Miss Allen said quietly, but I was told it wasn't my place to interfere in family matters. And yet the bruises continued. Yes. Next came Mrs. Patterson. She testified she'd seen Thomas outside her store multiple times with visible injuries. That once she'd watched Hendricks drag the boy down the street by his arm hard enough to make him cry. Did anyone intervene? Morrison asked. No, we were told to mind our business. Cole testified next. He described watching the Hendricks place, documenting Thomas's injuries from a distance. He produced photographs he'd taken, blurry but clear enough to show the boy limping, holding his side, sporting black eyes. Why didn't you report this to the sheriff? Cutler, Hendricks' lawyer, asked during cross-examination. I did. He told me there was nothing he could do without proof. And yet you continued to surveil my client's property. Why? Because someone needed to see what was happening to that boy. Or perhaps you needed justification for taking him. I needed proof that he was being hurt. I got it. Cutler smiled thinly. We'll see about that. Then it was Lena's turn. She stood and walked to the witness chair with her heart hammering. Morrison asked her why she wanted custody of Thomas. Because he needs someone who won't hurt him, she said simply. Because I know what it's like to be a child with nobody watching out for you. Because if we don't help him, nobody will. And you believe you and your husband can provide a better home than his natural father? I know we can. We've got food and shelter and safety. That's more than he has now. Cutler rose for cross-examination. He was a thin man with sharp eyes and a sharper voice. Mrs. Maddox, how long have you been married? 2 months? 2 months. And you think you're qualified to raise a child? I think I'm qualified not to beat one. Answer the question. I am answering it. You want to know if I'm qualified? I don't know, but I'm willing to try, which is more than Hendricks is doing. You've never had children of your own, have you? No. Never raised any? No. So you're asking this court to place a child in the care of two people who have no experience, no training, and have been married for exactly 63 days. Is that correct? Lena's hands tightened on the chair arms. Experience doesn't matter if all you're experienced at is hurting people. Your Honor, Cutler said, the witness is being combative. The witness is being honest, Morris said. Continue. Cutler turned back to Lena. Let's talk about your background, Mrs. Maddox. You came here as a mail-order bride, correct? Yes. But you weren't the bride that was ordered. You were a substitute. That's right. And when you arrived, Mr. Maddox rejected you. Morrison stood. Objection. Relevance? I'm establishing the petitioner's character, Your Honor. Overruled. Answer the question, Mrs. Maddox. Lena met Cutler's eyes. Cole didn't want me at first. I don't blame him. I wasn't what he paid for. Yet you stayed. Why? Because I had nowhere else to go. So you stayed out of desperation. I stayed because he offered me work. I earned my place. And eventually married him. Some might say that's quite convenient. Some might say I worked harder than anyone you've ever met to prove I belonged there. What's your point? Cutler smiled. My point, Mrs. Maddox, is that you're a woman who has spent her entire life surviving by any means necessary, including, apparently, taking other people's children. Morrison shot to his feet. Your Honor, that's withdrawn, Cutler said smoothly. No further questions. Lena walked back to her seat on shaking legs. Cole reached for her hand and squeezed it. You did good, he whispered. He made me sound like a criminal. He made himself sound like an ass. Don't worry. But Lena was worried. Cutler had planted doubt, and she could see it working on Morris's face. Then Hendricks took the stand. He was calm, almost pleasant, testified that he loved his son, that discipline was sometimes necessary but never excessive, that the bruises people had seen were from Thomas being clumsy and roughhousing with other boys. I'm not perfect, he said, looking directly at Morris. But I'm his father. That boy belongs with me. Can you explain the frequency of injuries? Morrison asked during cross-examination. Boys get hurt. That's what they do. Multiple black eyes. Broken ribs? I never broke his ribs. We have testimony from Dr. Marsh that Thomas came to him 3 months ago with fractured ribs, from falling out of a tree. A 10-year-old boy fractures his ribs falling from a tree, and you didn't think to mention that before? Hendrick's pleasant expression slipped. I'm mentioning it now. How convenient. Cutler objected, Morris sustained it, and Morrison returned to his seat looking frustrated. Then Morris did something unexpected. He called Thomas to the stand. The boy walked forward slowly, his eyes on the floor. He looked even smaller in the witness chair, swallowed by the space around him. Morris spoke gently. Thomas, do you understand why you're here? The boy nodded. I need you to answer out loud, son. Yes, sir. Good. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to tell the truth. Can you do that? Another nod. Yes, sir. Has your father ever hurt you? Thomas's eyes darted to Hendricks. Whatever he saw there made him go pale. No, sir. Lena's heart sank. You're sure about that? Morris pressed. Because we've heard testimony about bruises and injuries. Where did those come from? I fall sometimes. I'm clumsy. You fell hard enough to fracture your ribs? Yes, sir. Morris studied the boy for a long moment. Then he asked, Are you afraid of your father, Thomas? The courtroom went dead silent. Thomas didn't answer. Son, I need you to answer the question. No, sir. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm not afraid. Look at me when you answer. Thomas looked up. His eyes were full of terror. Morris sighed. You may step down. The boy practically ran back to his seat. Hendricks put a hand on his shoulder and Thomas flinched so hard everyone saw it. Morris saw it too. His expression hardened. I've heard enough, he said. I'll take a brief recess to consider my ruling. Court is adjourned for 30 minutes. He stood and left. The room erupted in whispers. Cole and Lena stayed seated. There was nothing to say. They'd done everything they could, and it might not be enough. Morrison came over. That flinch at the end, Morris saw it. So did everyone else, Lena said, but the boy denied everything. What's that going to matter? It matters because Morris isn't stupid. He knows a scared child when he sees one. Then why doesn't he just rule in our favor? Because the law is complicated, and because taking a child from his father sets a precedent Morris doesn't take lightly. Morrison gathered his papers. We'll know soon enough. The 30 minutes felt like hours. Lena and Cole sat in silence while the crowd murmured around them. She could feel people staring, speculating, judging. Finally, Morris returned. Everyone stood. I've reached a decision, he said as he sat. This is one of the harder cases I've had to rule on. On one hand, we have evidence of repeated injuries to a minor child. On the other, we have a father claiming those injuries are accidental and a son who won't testify against him. Lena held her breath. However, Morris continued, I've been on this bench for 23 years. I know fear when I see it, and that boy is afraid. He looked at Hendricks. Mr. Hendricks, I don't believe your son's injuries are accidental. I believe you're responsible for them. And while I can't prove it beyond reasonable doubt, I can act in the best interest of the child. Hendricks stood. Your Honor, you can't. Sit down. I'm not finished. Morris waited until Hendricks complied. I'm granting temporary custody to Cole and Lena Maddox for a period of 6 months. During that time, Thomas will live with them. You'll be allowed supervised visits once a month, and at the end of 6 months, we'll reconvene to determine permanent placement. The courtroom exploded. People were shouting, arguing, celebrating. Lena couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in her ears. They'd won. Not permanently, not completely, but they'd won. Cole grabbed her hand so hard it hurt. She grabbed back just as hard. Hendricks was on his feet, his face purple with rage. This is bullshit! You can't take my son! I just did. And if you continue to make a scene, I'll hold you in contempt. Morris banged his gavel. The boy will go with the Maddoxes today. You'll be notified of the visitation schedule. Court is dismissed. He left before anyone could argue. Hendricks started toward Cole and Lena, but Dutch stepped between them. Walk away, the sheriff said quietly. Right now. Hendricks glared at all of them, at Dutch, at Cole and Lena, at Morrison. Then his eyes found Thomas, still sitting in his chair, frozen. You remember who your real father is, Hendricks said. You remember where you belong. Then he turned and stormed out, Cutler hurrying after him. The crowd began to disperse, some people congratulating Cole and Lena, others shaking their heads in disapproval. Lena barely noticed. She was looking at Thomas. The boy was still sitting there, staring at nothing. He looked lost, terrified. Lena walked over slowly and crouched down in front of him. Thomas, she said gently, my name's Lena. This is Cole. We're going to take you home with us now. Is that okay? The boy looked at her with eyes that had stopped expecting kindness. I don't have a choice, do I? He said. You always have a choice, but we'd like you to come. We've got a room for you and food and space to breathe. No one's going to hurt you there. You promise? Lena's throat tightened. I promise. Thomas studied her face like he was trying to decide if she was lying. Then, slowly, he nodded. Cole came over and offered his hand. You ready? The boy took it with a grip that was barely there. They walked out of the church together into the bright July sun. People were still staring, still whispering, but Lena didn't care. They had Thomas. They had 6 months to prove they could give him something better. That was all that mattered. The ride home was quiet. Thomas sat in the back of the wagon, watching the landscape pass with wide, wary eyes. Lena kept glancing back at him, trying to think of something to say that wouldn't sound empty or false. Cole broke the silence first. You hungry, Thomas? The boy shook his head. When's the last time you ate? A shrug. We'll get you fed when we get home. Lena makes good stew. Another shrug. Lena tried. Do you like animals? We've got chickens and a few cattle, and a dog that mostly just sleeps. No response. They gave up and let him be. When they reached the ranch, Thomas climbed down from the wagon and stood in the yard, looking at the house like it might bite him. Come on, Lena said. I'll show you your room. She led him inside and down the hall to the small room next to hers. It was sparse, just a bed, a chest, and a window, but it was clean, and the bed had fresh blankets. It's not much, Lena said, but it's yours. You can arrange it however you want. Thomas walked to the bed and sat down carefully, like he expected it to collapse. I don't have anything to arrange, he said. We'll get you things. Clothes, books. Whatever you need. Why? The question caught Lena off guard. Why what? Why are you doing this? You don't know me. Lena sat down on the chest across from him. Because you need help. And because when I was your age, I needed help, and nobody gave it to me. I don't want that to happen to you. What if I'm not worth helping? Everyone's worth helping, Thomas. My father says I'm no good, says I'm clumsy and stupid and worthless. Lena's hands curled into fists. Your father's wrong. How do you know? Because nobody's worthless, especially not a kid who survived what you've survived. Thomas looked at her with something like hope, trying to break through the fear. He's going to come get me. You know that, right? In 6 months, the judge will give me back. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, you've got 6 months here. 6 months where nobody's going to hit you or tell you you're worthless. That's something, isn't it? The boy's eyes filled with tears he clearly didn't want to shed. Yeah, that's something. Lena stood. I'm going to make dinner. You rest. Come out when you're ready. She left him there and found Cole in the kitchen, staring out the window. He okay? Cole asked. He's scared. Doesn't trust us yet. Can't blame him. No, we just have to show him we mean what we said. Cole turned to face her. What if we can't? What if 6 months isn't enough time to fix what Hendricks broke? Then we do what we can and hope it's enough. Lena crossed to him and took his hand. We didn't do this because we thought it would be easy. We did it because it was right. Yeah, I just hope that's enough. That night they ate dinner with Thomas sitting at the table, silent and watching. He barely touched his food, but he stayed. That felt like progress. After dinner, Cole went out to check the animals and Lena started cleaning up. Thomas appeared beside her with his empty plate. I can help, he said quietly. You don't have to. I want to. I'm supposed to earn my keep. Lena stopped and looked at him. You're not a worker, Thomas. You're a kid. You don't have to earn anything. But my father always said, your father was wrong about a lot of things. She dried her hands and crouched down to his level. You're here because we want you here. Not because you're useful. Because you deserve a home. Understand? Thomas nodded, but she could see he didn't believe it. It would take time to prove they meant what they said, time to show him that safety wasn't conditional, time to undo years of damage. But they had 6 months, and Lena was determined to make every single day count. That night, after Thomas had gone to bed, Lena and Cole sat on the porch in the dark. Think we can do this? Cole asked. I don't know, but we're going to try like hell. What if Hendricks causes trouble? Then we deal with it, together. Cole reached over and took her hand. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the wind and the distant sound of cattle and the quiet breathing of a house that finally had a child in it. Lena thought about everything that had led them here, the wrong bride arriving, the fight to stay, the decision to marry, and now this, taking in a broken boy and trying to give him something better. None of it had been planned. None of it had been easy. But sitting there with Cole's hand in hers and a child sleeping safely down the hall, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The first week with Thomas was harder than either of them expected. The boy moved through the house like a ghost, silent and watchful, flinching at sudden movements and waiting for punishment that never came. He wouldn't speak unless spoken to, wouldn't eat unless told to, and spent most of his time in his room staring at the wall. Lena tried everything she could think of. She made his favorite foods, or tried to since he wouldn't tell her what he liked. She offered to teach him to read better, to ride, to help with the animals. He refused it all, with quiet, polite refusals that broke her heart. Cole was worse at it. He didn't know how to talk to children, didn't know how to bridge the gap between his natural silence and a boy who needed reassurance. So he did what he knew. He worked, and he left Thomas alone, and he felt useless. On the 8th day, Lena found Thomas sitting on the porch steps before dawn, shivering in the cold. What are you doing out here? She asked, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. Waiting. For what? For you to tell me what to do today. What chores I have. Lena sat down beside him. Thomas, you don't have chores. You're not here to work. Then why am I here? Because you're a kid. Kids are supposed to play and learn and grow, not work themselves to death. I don't know how to do those things. The admission was so simple, so honest, that Lena felt her throat close up. Then we'll figure it out together. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken? You're not broken. You're hurt. There's a difference. Thomas looked at her with eyes that were far too old for 10. How do you know? Because I was hurt too once, and I survived. So will you. Something shifted in his expression. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of possibility. That afternoon, Lena dragged Cole out to the barn and shut the door behind them. We're losing him, she said. I know. He thinks he's here to work off a debt. He thinks we're going to send him back when he's not useful anymore. Cole ran a hand through his hair. I don't know how to fix that. We have to show him he belongs here, not as a worker, as family. How? Every time I try to talk to him, he looks at me like I'm going to hit him. Because you're big and male and remind him of Hendrix, you have to be patient. I'm trying. Try harder. Lena's voice was sharp. That boy needs us both, Cole, not just me. You think I know what I'm doing any better than you? I'm making this up as I go, but we have to keep trying. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, what if we're not enough? What if he needs someone who actually knows how to be a parent? Nobody knows how to be a parent until they are one. We'll learn, together. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? Cole pulled her close and held her tight. All right, we'll figure it out. They started small. Cole began teaching Thomas to rope, standing behind him and guiding his hands with careful patience. He didn't talk much, that wasn't his way, but his actions spoke volumes. He was gentle, he was consistent, and slowly, Thomas started to relax around him. Lena worked on the daily routines. She made Thomas's favorite breakfast after finally getting him to admit he liked eggs. She sat with him in the evenings and read aloud from books she'd borrowed from Miss Allen. She told him stories about Chicago, about growing up alone, about all the ways she'd survived. You were by yourself? Thomas asked one night. No parents? They died when I was 12. After that, it was just me. Were you scared? All the time. But I learned to be scared and keep moving anyway. Thomas was quiet, processing this. Did it get easier? Eventually, when I found people who cared about me. Like Cole. Like you. I'm not people. You're a person. That counts. A week turned into 2, then 3. Thomas started talking more, asking questions, engaging. He still flinched sometimes, still went quiet when voices were raised, but the fear was gradually being replaced by something else. Curiosity. Hope. Then Hendrix showed up for his first supervised visit. Morrison had arranged it at the sheriff's office, neutral ground with Dutch present to keep things civil. Lena and Cole brought Thomas into town on a Saturday morning, and the boy went rigid the moment he saw his father waiting. It's okay, Lena said quietly. Dutch is right there. Nothing's going to happen. He's going to be mad. Let him be mad. That's not your problem. They walked Thomas inside, and Hendrix stood when he saw them. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes were cold. Thomas, he said, come here, boy. Thomas looked at Lena. She nodded. He crossed the room slowly and stood in front of his father, shoulders hunched. Hendrix looked him over critically. You getting enough to eat? Yes, sir. They treating you right? Yes, sir. You remember what I told you. You remember where you belong. Dutch cleared his throat. Mr. Hendrix, this is supposed to be a visit, not an interrogation. Hendrix ignored him. I'm your father, Thomas. These people are strangers. Don't you forget that. That's enough, Cole said, stepping forward. I'm talking to my son. You're intimidating him. That's not allowed. I'll talk to him however I want. Dutch stood. No, you won't. This visit is supervised, which means you follow the rules or it ends right now. Sit down and have a civil conversation, or leave. Hendrix glared at all of them, but sat. The next 30 minutes were excruciating. Hendrix asked Thomas questions designed to make him feel guilty. Was he helping around the ranch? Was he being respectful? Did he miss his real home? Thomas answered in monosyllables, his whole body tense. When the time was up, Lena practically pulled Thomas out of there. He was shaking. You okay? she asked once they were outside. He hates me. He doesn't hate you. He's angry he lost control over you. That's different. He said I betrayed him. Cole crouched down to Thomas's level. Listen to me. You didn't betray anyone. You're a kid. You don't owe your father loyalty when he's hurting you. You understand? Thomas nodded, but tears were streaming down his face. I don't want to see him again. You have to, legally, but only once a month, and we'll be right there with you every time. Promise? Promise. That night, Thomas had nightmares. Lena heard him crying and went to his room to find him curled up in bed, shaking. She sat beside him and rubbed his back until he calmed down. Want to talk about it? She asked. I dreamed he came and took me back, that you couldn't stop him. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. The judge said 6 months. What if he decides I have to go back? Lena chose her words carefully. I can't promise you what the judge will decide, but I can promise that we're going to fight like hell to keep you here, and that no matter what happens, you'll always have people who care about you. Even if I have to leave? Even then. You're part of this family now, Thomas. That doesn't change just because a judge says so. He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. Family? Yeah, family. Thomas threw his arms around her and held on tight. Lena held him back and felt something crack open in her chest. This boy, this scared, broken, brave boy, had become hers in a way she hadn't expected. Not because a court said so, but because he needed her and she needed him. The weeks rolled into months. Summer turned to fall, and the ranch settled into new rhythms. Thomas learned to ride and rope and shoot. He started laughing more, talking more, being more of a kid and less of a frightened animal. He and Cole developed their own bond, built on shared work and quiet understanding. But the supervised visits continued, and each one was worse than the last. Hendricks grew more aggressive, more manipulative. He told Thomas that Cole and Lena were just using him for free labor, that they'd get tired of him and send him back, that real family was blood, and blood was all that mattered. Thomas came home from each visit quieter, more withdrawn. It would take days to pull him back out of the darkness Hendricks planted. We can't keep doing this, Lena said after a particularly bad visit in October. It's destroying him. What choice do we have? Cole asked. The court ordered it. Then we go back to court. We get the visits stopped. On what grounds? On the grounds that Hendricks is using them to psychologically abuse his son. Morrison was skeptical when they brought it to him. That's a hard case to make. Hendricks hasn't violated any rules. He's just talking to Thomas. He's terrorizing him, Lena insisted. Every visit sets him back weeks. I believe you, but proving it to Morris is another matter. We'd need Thomas to testify about what his father says to him. He's 10 years old. You can't put that on him. Then we have no case. Lena wanted to scream. Instead, she went home and talked to Thomas. How would you feel about talking to the judge? She asked, telling him what your father says during visits. Thomas went pale. I can't do that. Why not? Because if I tell and the judge doesn't believe me, my father will know I talked. And then he trailed off, but the fear in his eyes said everything. Thomas, we're not going to let him hurt you. You can't promise that. What if the judge sends me back anyway? What if I have to live with him again after I told? Lena had no answer for that. Because he was right. They couldn't guarantee the outcome. That night, she and Cole sat up late trying to figure out another way. Maybe we just wait it out, Cole said. 2 more months until the final hearing. We show Morris how well Thomas is doing with us, and that's enough. What if it's not? What if Hendricks convinces Morris that blood matters more than anything else? Then we appeal. We take it to a higher court. And how long does that take? How many more months of Thomas living in limbo, not knowing if he's safe? Cole had no answer. The next morning, everything changed. Lena was in the garden when she heard riders approaching. Not one horse, several. She looked up to see Hendricks with 4 men she didn't recognize, all armed. Her blood went cold. She dropped the basket she was holding and ran for the house. Cole, she shouted, get Thomas inside now. Cole appeared in the doorway with Thomas behind him. He saw the riders and his face went hard. He pushed Thomas back inside and grabbed the rifle from above the door. Stay with Lena, he told the boy. Don't come out no matter what. Hendricks and his men stopped 20 feet from the house. They didn't dismount. Where's my son? Hendricks called. He's not your son anymore, Cole said. Not for another 2 months at least. And you're trespassing. I got a right to see him. You got supervised visits once a month. This isn't a visit, and there's no supervision. Leave. Not without Thomas. That's not happening. One of the men with Hendricks spoke up. We can do this easy or hard, Maddox. Your choice. Cole raised the rifle. I choose you getting off my land before someone gets hurt. Inside, Lena was holding Thomas, who was shaking violently. What's happening? He whispered. Your father's making a mistake. Cole's handling it. He's going to take me. No, he's not. You don't know that. Outside, the standoff continued. Hendricks was talking, his voice carrying through the walls. That boy belongs to me. I'm taking him back where he belongs. You try that and you'll be in violation of a court order. You'll lose any chance of getting him back legally. I don't care about legal anymore. The law already took my son. I'm just taking him back. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. Lena made a decision. She grabbed Thomas and pulled him toward the back of the house. What are you doing? He asked. Keeping you safe. There's a cellar door in the back bedroom. You're going down there and you're staying there until this is over. I can't leave you and Cole. You can and you will. Now move. She got him to the cellar and practically pushed him down the ladder. Don't come out until one of us comes for you. You understand? Lena, promise me, Thomas. I promise. She shut the door and covered it with a rug, then grabbed the pistol Cole kept in his nightstand and went back to the main room. Through the window, she could see the situation escalating. One of Hendricks's men had dismounted and was walking toward the house. Cole had the rifle trained on him. That's far enough, Cole said. The man kept coming. Cole fired a warning shot into the dirt in front of him. The man stopped. Next one goes through you, Cole said. Hendricks laughed. You think you can take all of us, Maddox? There's 5 of us and 1 of you. 2 of us, Lena said, stepping onto the porch with the pistol, and I'm a real good shot. Hendricks's eyes narrowed. You'd kill for that boy? Without hesitation. Would you die for him? Because that's what's going to happen if you don't leave. Right now. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, from down the road came the sound of more horses. Dutch appeared with 3 deputies, all armed. He took in the scene and his face went dark. Hendricks, he said, you're in violation of a court order. Dismount and surrender your weapons. This is none of your business, Dutch. A man threatening 2 people on their own property with armed backup? That's my business. Now get down before I drag you down. Hendricks looked around at his men, calculating odds. Finally, he dismounted. This isn't over, he said to Cole. That boy's mine. Not anymore, Cole said. Dutch arrested Hendricks on the spot, charged him with trespassing, threatening violence, and violating the custody agreement. The other men scattered, not wanting to get involved now that the law had shown up. After they left, Lena and Cole stood in the yard, still holding their weapons, trying to process what had almost happened. How'd Dutch know to come? Lena asked. Garrett, Cole said, pointing to a rider disappearing in the distance. Saw him watching from the ridge. Must have gone for help. Garrett helped us. World's full of surprises. They went inside and got Thomas out of the cellar. He was still shaking, but when he saw them both safe, he broke down completely. They held him while he cried, and Lena felt rage burn through her so hot she could barely breathe. Hendricks had done this, had terrorized his own son one last time, but it would be the last time she'd make sure of it. The next day, Morrison filed an emergency motion to terminate Hendricks's parental rights entirely. The hearing was set for a week later. After yesterday, we've got him, Morrison said. He threatened you, violated the custody order, and attempted to kidnap Thomas. Morris won't overlook that. He better not, Cole said, because if he sends that boy back, I'm taking Thomas and leaving the state. Lena looked at him, surprised. You'd do that? Without question. I'm not letting Hendricks have him. Morrison held up a hand. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We present the facts, we let Morris do his job, and we trust the system. The system already failed that boy once, Lena said. I'm not trusting it further than I can throw it. The hearing was packed. Word had spread about the armed confrontation, and everyone wanted to see how it ended. Hendricks sat with Cutler, looking defiant despite the charges against him. Morris called the court to order and got straight to business. I've reviewed the petition and the incident reports. Mr. Hendricks, you violated a court order. Do you dispute that? I was trying to see my son, Hendricks said. That's not a crime. Showing up at the Maddox Ranch with 4 armed men absolutely is a crime. You're lucky you're not facing more serious charges. They're brainwashing him, turning him against me. They're giving him a safe home, which is more than you ever did. Morris looked at Cutler. Does your client have anything to say in his defense? Cutler stood. Your Honor, my client acted out of desperation. He loves his son and wants him home. Surely that's understandable. What's understandable is that he's a danger to that child and to the people caring for him. I've seen enough. Morris turned to Thomas, who was sitting between Lena and Cole. Son, come up here. Thomas walked to the front on trembling legs. Morris spoke gently. Thomas, I need to ask you some questions. Can you do that for me? Yes, sir. Do you want to go back to your father? The courtroom went silent. Thomas looked at Hendricks, then at Lena and Cole. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but steady. No, sir, I don't. Why not? Because he hurts me, and because Cole and Lena don't. They make me feel safe, like I matter. Do you understand that if I terminate your father's rights, you'll legally belong to the Maddoxes? You'll be their son. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. Yes, sir. And that's what you want? More than anything. Morris nodded and told Thomas to sit down. Then he looked at Hendricks. Mr. Hendricks, I'm terminating your parental rights effective immediately. Thomas Hendricks will be placed in the permanent custody of Cole and Lena Maddox, with the option to formally adopt him should they choose to do so. You are prohibited from contact with the child. Violate that, and you will go to jail. Do you understand? Hendricks shot to his feet. You can't do this. He's my blood. He's a child who deserves better than you, and I'm giving it to him. We're done here. Morris banged his gavel. Court dismissed. Hendricks lunged toward Thomas, but Dutch was there immediately, restraining him. The man was shouting, cursing, fighting as they dragged him out. Thomas ran to Lena and Cole and threw his arms around both of them. I can stay? He asked through tears. Really stay? Really stay, Lena said, holding him tight. You're ours now, forever. Cole wrapped his arms around both of them, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he understood what family actually meant. It wasn't blood. It wasn't obligation. It was choosing each other every single day. The town's reaction was mixed. Some people congratulated them. Others thought they'd overstepped, that Hendricks had been wronged. But Cole and Lena didn't care. They had Thomas, and that was all that mattered. The adoption was finalized 6 weeks later in a quiet ceremony at the courthouse. Thomas officially became Thomas Maddox, and he cried through the whole thing. That winter was the first one where the ranch felt truly alive. Thomas filled the house with noise and energy and questions. He helped Cole with the animals, learned to cook with Lena, and slowly became the kid he'd never gotten to be. There were hard days. Days when the nightmares came back. Days when Thomas would flinch at sudden movements or go quiet when voices were raised. But there were more good days than bad. Days filled with laughter and work and the slow, steady building of trust. Spring came early that year, and with it, a sense of renewal. The garden Lena planted bloomed wild and colorful. The cattle had new calves. The ranch was thriving in a way it hadn't in years. One evening in late April, Lena and Cole sat on the porch watching Thomas play with the dog. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. You ever think about how we got here? Cole asked. All the time. You regret any of it? Lena thought about the train platform, the humiliation, the fear, the fight. Thought about the wrong bride arriving and everything that came after. Not a single second, she said. You? Cole looked at her with something that might have been love, though neither of them had said the words yet. Best mistake I ever made was letting you stay. I wasn't a mistake. I was an improvement. He laughed. Yeah, you were. Thomas ran up onto the porch, out of breath and grinning. Can we go riding tomorrow, all 3 of us? If the work's done, Cole said. I'll help. I'll do twice as much. You always do twice as much. Go get washed up for dinner. Thomas ran inside, and Lena leaned against Cole's shoulder. We did good, she said. We did. He's happy. So are you. So are you. Cole pulled her closer. Yeah, I am. They sat there as the stars came out, and Lena thought about all the ways her life had changed. She'd come here as the wrong bride, unwanted and uncertain, and she'd become exactly what this family needed. So had Cole. So had Thomas. They were all wrong in the best possible way. Later that night, after Thomas was asleep and the house was quiet, Cole found Lena in the kitchen. I need to tell you something, he said. What? He took her hand. I love you. Should have said it months ago, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Lena Maddox. Lena felt tears sting her eyes. Took you long enough. I know, I'm slow. You're worth waiting for. She kissed him, soft and sure. I love you too. They stood there in the dim kitchen, holding each other, and felt the weight of everything they'd survived together. The wrong bride. The fights. The fear. The boy who'd needed saving and ended up saving them. It hadn't been perfect, it hadn't been easy, but it had been real. And it had been theirs. And that was more than enough. Outside, the wind swept across the Wyoming plains, carrying the scent of spring and new beginnings. Inside, a family that had been built from broken pieces stood whole and strong. The wrong bride had arrived on that cold platform months ago. But somewhere along the way, she'd become exactly right. And the rancher who'd rejected her had learned that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never saw coming. They'd built something real from nothing. A marriage from obligation, a family from strangers, a home from loneliness. And in the end, that was everything. Thomas grew up strong and loved. He worked the ranch alongside Cole, learning everything the land could teach him. He called Lena Ma within a year, and she cried the first time he said it. Cole became the father he never thought he'd be, patient and steady and fierce in his protection. He taught Thomas to be good, to work hard, to stand up for what mattered. Lena became the heart of their home. She filled it with warmth and food and stubborn love. She never let either of them quit on themselves or each other. And together, they proved that family wasn't about blood or perfection or getting everything right. It was about showing up every day, through the hard times and the good. It was about choosing each other when the world said you shouldn't. It was about taking broken pieces and making something whole. Years later, when people asked Thomas about his childhood, he'd smile and say he had the best parents anyone could ask for. People who'd fought for him when nobody else would, who'd given him a home when he had nothing. When they asked Cole about his marriage, he'd say he got lucky, that the wrong bride turned out to be the only one who could have survived him. And when they asked Lena about her life, she'd look at her family, her impossible, stubborn, beautiful family, and say she finally found where she belonged. On a cold Wyoming platform, the wrong bride had arrived, and she'd turned out to be exactly what they all needed. The end.